LVMH is a company that we are all familiar with, but did you know that their foundation and the few years after that were rife with inner fighting and petty business moves? Their history is so ridiculous, and there's a good reason Bernard Arnault won out in the end, so you're gonna love this video. Really quickly before we begin, I have just launched channel memberships down below. It's the same tier pricing as Patreon, but more accessible for people on YouTube, and with slightly different perks, including the new use of custom emojis. If I have 2 members, just 2, any 2, I can add more custom emojis as well. And somebody has already joined before I even scripted this announcement today. So actually it's just 1 more member and I can add more custom emojis for you guys to use in the comment section below. There's also a few exclusive videos that have just never made it to the full channel, including the semi-unedited 5-hour version of the life and death of Alexander McQueen. There's also the history of Bieber Cosmetics, which is the company that invented fast fashion. And there's a couple of other things which I have in the pipeline that I'll upload very, very soon. I've been wanting to have a way to make more personal videos, maybe show you my face, maybe finally give you an actual opinion. Like I want to do a video about Blasi's debut and all of the different Nazi references that are in that, because there was a surprising amount of them. And maybe do some more actual personal stuff so you can kind of get to know me a bit more. Basically, I just like a better way to communicate with you personally, and I think this just might be it. The bottom tier is just $2, actually less than $2, for the emojis and loyalty badges, and basically everything above that has the exclusive videos where we can have that more direct, personal dialogue. Sorry for speaking so long. Thank you very, very much for listening. Do click the join link below. Now on with the video and a much less hyped up version of my voice. Okay, bye. This video is full of an incredible amount of timelines. So to begin with, before we even really truly begin, the most impactful moving parts that you need to know are 1. Moet-Hennessy, which is a champagne company founded in 1743. Chandon SC, which is a sparkling wine company that we don't technically know when it was founded. We'll get back to that. Hennessy, which is a cognac brand founded in 1765, Louis Vuitton, which you obviously know, founded 1854, and Dior, which you've definitely never heard of. It's this tiny little itty-bitty brand that, I don't know, makes something, and obviously were founded in 1946. For brevity, this story is going to start way later than all of that, in 1969. By which time Remy Moet, founder of Moet-Hennessy, had already absorbed his new son-in-law's company, Chandon SC, in 1833 to form Moet et Chandon. Moet et Chandon was a massive champagne and sparkling wine company already at that time. It spanned 25,000 hectares in the Champagne region alone and was run by a man called Count Robert Jean de Vogue, who was one of the descendants of the original founding family of Moet. However, because the French government, knowing the value of champagne as a product, were fearful that a monopoly would damage the quality and authenticity of champagne as a beverage as a whole, over the course of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, they expanded their regulations, directly affecting Moet et Chandon's prospective growth, which was a problem because they had already put their company up on the stock exchange where they'd been listed since 1962, and they didn't have a solution. De Vogue decided it would be best to search for a professional manager for the company and strike before it was too late. In that, they found Alain Chevalier, a well-established business person who they believed would be the right person for the job at saving them from expanding into a corner. And they were right, effectively. Chevalier quickly realized that they could expand by buying other different types of businesses to diversify their portfolio, creating a stronger foundation for their business in case this one sector was to continue to be at risk. Of all of the many things that they bought within this time, 2 of them are very, very important to the story. The first is Hennessy. The 2 families were already linked by marriage, and the Moet family knew that they were comparatively cash poor, so it was just a mutually beneficial way to strengthen their family business, turning the company into Moet-Hennessy in 1971. The second business that's really important to this story is also in 1971, and it was their acquisition of Parfum Christian Dior from the Boussac Group. So the Boussac Group is a surprise piece of glue for the eventual LVMH conglomerate, so let's quickly take time to discuss it. So Boussac was a textile farm and weavers founded by Marcel Boussac in 1911, who had a primary focus on cotton. However, come the end of the war, no one has any money for cotton. Generally, 1940 styles are quite conservative in their fabric usage, and the future doesn't look bright for Boussac, the company. So, Marcel Boussac decides to back a fashion house to repopularize the effectively overconsumption of cotton once again. This is why Christian Dior debuted in 1946 with the famously overconsumptive new look design. But it wasn't really new. Many other designers had shown very similar looks in Christian Bérard's Théâtre de la Mode in 1945, which was the Chambre syndicale de la couture's attempt to bring back French couture after the war. But none of these designers had the money nor the resources to produce such an elaborate design, especially for a full fashion show, being that they debuted this literally within the same year as the end of the war. Boussac, however, did have the money. He had sold cotton to the Nazis all throughout the war and had ended up being one of very few textile business people to survive nearly unscathed. He was Catholic, which aligned with the Nazis. He was pretty unscathed. He was therefore in quite a unique position to fund Christian Dior's debut and the incredible marketing that went around it, using the idea of scandal to raise awareness. It worked phenomenally well at raising awareness, and in 1947, Parfum Christian Dior was founded to benefit further from the fame that he had bought Dior. This rings in about a period of 20 years over which Boussac overexpanded the Boussac Group, believing that all the money he could get from Dior would make into a good, unrivaled parent company. He invests in a whole manner of things: sporting equipment, newspapers, different textile things, but in a way that only accrued a large amount of debt without seeing much return on investment. This is why in 1971 he sold Parfum Christian Dior to Moet-Hennessy, because it was a valuable asset and frankly he needed the money. By 1978, the Boussac Group was bankrupt. It was a very public, humiliating failure, as Dior was still well loved and profitable at this time, worth approximately $175 million. That same year of 1978, the French government feared that the bankruptcy of this colossal group would have serious adverse effects on France. The closure would result in the loss of approximately 50,000 jobs and the loss of one of their most famous international exports in Dior. As such, with pressure from the public and with politicians, they assigned a court-supervised administration to ensure positive restructuring and asset resale. The majority of the Boussac Group was sold to the Willow brothers, who were textile merchants from the north. However, as the market continued to fall, they just weren't in the financial position to inject the money that the companies needed to return them to stature, and frankly, liquidation was not an option. This brings us to Bernard Arnault. He was then a small-time investor who had nothing to do with fashion or luxury in his largely American property portfolio when he acquired the entire of the Boussac Group. He got Christian Dior, Le Bon Marché, Produce, and some other smaller companies in 1984. This was quite a controversial choice from the government, as much like with the Willow brothers, Arnault did not actually have the money needed for reinvestment without financial backers. I mean, he did have financial backers, obviously, that's how he won the bid, but he only actually put in a quarter of the $60 million it cost to buy the group in the first place. And frankly, that was riskier than some of their other options. Regardless, the government did choose Arnault over the other candidates, and the companies were all consolidated under Christian Dior SA as part of Group Arnault. They had bought a business worth $175 million in Dior, plus several other businesses, for only $60 million. It was an incredible deal for Arnault. Meanwhile, simultaneously, Moet-Hennessy was also doing extremely well on the stock market. Quote, under Chevalier, Moet-Hennessy's revenues soared from $300 million in 1972 to well over $1 billion in 1988. Today, Moet-Hennessy accounts for 1 out of every 5 bottles of cognac, and 1 out of every 7 bottles of champagne sold worldwide. Chevalier was Prince Charming. French conservatives asked him to become Minister of Industry, businessmen begged him to head France's equivalent of the National Association of Manufacturers, but Chevalier turned both down to stay at the top of the luxury world. However, soon an unexplained problem would arise when Moet-Hennessy's stock rose quickly and without reason. It was signs of a hostile takeover, and in total, the Moet, Chandon and Hennessy families truly only actually controlled 22% of the voting stock. They were in trouble. This is what turned them to Henri Racamier. Henri Racamier was Louis Vuitton's great-grandson-in-law and had been a miracle for their company as well. When he took over in 1977, Louis Vuitton had been a very small, I believe they only had 2 stores in Paris even, business, so it was revered, but only by a small set of people. He pushed for the company to go global, to go onto the stock market, and after they did in 1984, it gave them the funds to expand aggressively. Racamier saw Louis Vuitton basically on par with Moet-Hennessy, and by June 1987, they announced their companies would combine to create LVMH. It gave them a combined 51% of the voting stock. But of course, our story does not end there, because you see, while Racamier saw the union as a merger, Chevalier saw it as an absorption. And it kind of was. Chevalier had become chairman and CEO, while Racamier had only become vice president. He was furious. Blocked from making acquisitions, with the first being Lanvin in fact, Racamier decided to bolster the Louis Vuitton weight within the company by sponsoring 4 cars in Formula One. Though it backfired when Chevalier approved because they used their champagne, saying in the press that champagne was more valuable as it was on every supermarket shelf, while Louis Vuitton still needed exclusive distribution. The men were fighting, kind of publicly, and yet it didn't stop the stock from being suspect, when LVMH stock sharply rose again in the spring of 1988. Perhaps one of the 4 families would be enticed to sell. He suggested to sell a 3.5% stake in LVMH to Guinness plc, the British beer and spirits giant headed by Anthony Tennant, who you obviously know who they are, and Racamier agreed. Guinness was already distributing their products for the LVMH brands in North America and Asia anyway, so it seemed a mutually beneficial sale. For this reason, the offer was soon expanded to a 20% holding from Guinness to get even more protection for LVMH. Sell stock to the people they trusted, defend from an unknown hostile takeover. However, you remember that Racamier was already perturbed that LVMH saw Louis Vuitton as lesser? Well, this was kind of the nail in the coffin for that assumption. They were spending another 20% to food and beverage. Now, he realized he wasn't just second string, but third, fourth if you include the Chandon family. This is what led Racamier to Bernard Arnault. Arnault owned Dior, and Racamier wanted an ally in the same sector. It also helped that between 1984, when Arnault acquired the Boussac Group, and 1986, he'd already pushed it well into the black by consolidating their brands, ridding the parent company of 9,000 workers, getting rid of their disposable nappy division and most of their textile companies to focus on the areas of business that were their most promising, including the foundation of Christian Lacroix, which had taken the fashion world by storm in its foundation in 1987. By this point, in 1988, Bernard Arnault was a very, very well-respected businessman. The Boussac Group bankruptcy had been the largest financial disaster since the war, and Arnault was seen to have single-handedly fixed it. He was a god. Racamier offered Arnault to bid for 25% of LVMH's stock. To Racamier, it would be Tennant and Chevalier versus Racamier and Arnault. However, Racamier once again seemed to have come at the deal with an inflated sense of self-worth, as he saw this allyship with Bernard Arnault with the outlook that the much younger man would be his protege. Instead, Arnault had been very much aware of the trouble at LVMH, and he was going to use this as his way in. knowing that the cracks could be exploited. He might finally get back the Parfum Christian Dior business that had once been lost from Boussac all those years before and was inarguably the most profit-making Dior entity. His investment banker, Antoine Bernheim, was not as optimistic, fearing that he was sure to lose a war against Guinness, Moet, and the Chandon families, in which case they may all lose out because the shares had become so fragmented by this point that they were at risk of takeover anyway, advised him to do something a little different. This was when Arnault decided to partner instead with Chevalier and Guinness. So he bought 24% of LVMH's stock for $1.5 billion, backed by Lazard Frères, who was his original investor anyway, and backed by Guinness plc themselves. He had double-crossed Racamier, and Racamier was furious. Soon, the Paris stock market was rife with rumors that Racamier had got his Vuitton family members together to buy LVMH stock for themselves to get a blocking minority. Supposedly, they said that they wanted 33%, which would effectively gain them control. But because the rumor was outed so quickly, Arnault engaged faster to block Racamier's block by spending $600 million in just 3 days on various businesses to push the Arnault-Guinness alliance shares to 37.5%. Arnault became the dominant shareholder basically overnight and put his own father as chairman of LVMH's supervisory board, which was a spot once promised to a Vuitton family member. Racamier was fuming, livid, furious. He went back to Chevalier that October, tail between his legs, wolf led to the chicken coop, to admit that he had basically allowed Arnault and Guinness to take over their family companies. By December, they proposed a trial separation. It was their last-ditch attempt to get their company back. Moet and Hennessy would go your way, Horace, and Louis Vuitton would go mine. For Chevalier, this would mean no more dealing with Racamier's loose cannon, and for Racamier, it meant not being second, third, or fifth string. Arnault, in this hypothetical, would gain control of Christian Dior perfumes in the split, which was something he had always wanted and one of the motivations for him jumping at the chance to go into LVMH in the first place. But it was far from enough. Arnault was now livid. In January 1989, backed again by Guinness and by Lazard Frères, he sunk another $500 million into LVMH stock over 2 days. The Guinness-Arnault alliance now had 43.5% of LVMH's shares, 35% of their voting rights, and with it, the ability to hit Racamier and Chevalier with a giant middle finger. There would be no trial separation. In response, Chevalier resigned, but Racamier did not. Over the next 10 months, Racamier fought tooth and nail to keep his business, acting without Arnault's approval, making products, throwing corporate parties, and not inviting Arnault. Basically, doing whatever he could to act like a perturbed 77-year-old man. To everyone from the outside, it really looked like he was trying to damage their stock. In response, Arnault took Racamier to court. 1, to say that he was ruining the business, and 2, to say that he should have retired at 70 because he was now 77. He was trying to retire many years before, in fact. Anyway, this court action was to seek an emergency Louis Vuitton shareholders meeting, not just for LVMH, but specifically for the family of Louis Vuitton, to acknowledge that Racamier was damaging their company. Racamier sought the backing of the Vuitton family members and did get it. Arnault sought the backing of Moet, Chandon, and the Hennessy families, who also did give their support to Arnault. All of these families, of course, did still own stakes at this time, regardless of whether they were in control or not, and that's why they were still continued to be so important. Together, all of these families entered into a gruesome legal fight that lasted months. The Moet, Chandon, and Hennessy families all went on record to say that they just wanted peace from this. Racamier led the Vuitton family to nullify an Arnault major stock purchase, which made another huge legal battle. The shareholders' meeting couldn't be held until after that legal battle was sorted out. The LVMH shareholders voted to strip Racamier of his vice chairman position in November 1989 and succeeded. I mean, it was one thing after another. Arnault even bitterly hit back after asking French law enforcement to prosecute some of the Louis Vuitton managers for, quote, misappropriating company assets for personal use. There's no note on whether that actually came of anything, but the act was done. He had asked law enforcement to step in. In the end, Henri Racamier finally left LVMH in January 1990, ousted from a company that he had founded so many years before. Finally, LVMH was under Guinness Arnault control. The drama was finally over. In 1992, LVMH, still consolidated under the Arnault Group, was put under Christian Dior SA, and more or less the rest is history. The company would go on to buy luxury brand after luxury brand, biggering and bettering their group. Slowly over time, Arnault acquired a little more of the group as well from shareholders just to confirm his place. The Guinness interest did go down a little in this time too. Some people believe they're completely out of LVMH by 1994 entirely. I find that hard to believe. Today, honestly, with all of the different figures out there, it's hard to know how much even Arnault owns of LVMH, to be totally honest. It's definitely in the late 40s range, which is the majority share, but I wouldn't believe anyone that tries to give you an exact figure on this. Nobody seems to know. Literally every source is different. Anyway, from here is the LVMH we know today. The companies they bought minority stakes in way before now became fully owned by LVMH, and today they are one of the biggest parent companies in the world. Arnault himself is one of the richest men in the world. Hopefully on your screen is a timeline of the LVMH brands. Lord knows I've probably missed one or two. You can let me know in the comments. I just realized while editing how incredibly small all of these names are, so I will also be putting this timeline on my Instagram. Feel free to follow me there at understitch, Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe. It was a lot of effort, this video. For videos like this one, but about beauty brands, do check out Underskin here. If you did like this, actually, you'll really like my Mysterious History of Sephora video. I think that's the title. It's brilliant. It's absolutely baffling. It's a history that confused the hell out of me. I loved it. And a special thank you, of course, as always, goes out to my patrons over on Patreon for their continued and ongoing support. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.